Hello, everyone. I made all of these cookies from just one dough. That's right. There are 5 different varieties of cookies here, and they were all made from just one gluten-free butter cookie dough, and I'm going to show you how to make each one of them. So let's get into it. All right, we'll start by creaming the butter, and I have here 750 grams of butter. It's a lot of butter, but we're making a big batch of dough. So to that, I'm adding about a tablespoon of vanilla bean paste. You can also use vanilla extract and about 300 grams of powdered sugar. My powdered sugar, I measured it out a couple of hours ago, and because it is so humid here, it kind of settled into my bowl and it's not wanting to come out. So I'm just going to use my hand to help get it out of there. Now I'm using my handheld mixer for this instead of my stand mixer because I have a smaller KitchenAid mixer and it isn't quite big enough to handle this amount of dough all at once. So if you have a bigger KitchenAid, then by all means go for that because it's going to get the job done so much quicker. But, handheld mixers are just fine for this. One day I'll get a new KitchenAid, but mine is still kicking after 20, maybe even 30 years. So when it kicks the bucket, then I'll finally get a KitchenAid, a new one. Okay, so now I'm going to add 3 large egg whites, and these are at room temperature, of course. So see how it starts to look a little curdled? That's perfectly normal until we add in the flour. So don't get alarmed if you see this. And I've got 900 grams of flour here, y'all. I told you this is a huge batch of cookie dough. And I've added a half a teaspoon salt to this as well. So I'm going to add this in increments of maybe 3. So just so I don't get flour going everywhere. Alrighty, the dough is done. Easy peasy. Now I'm just going to divide it into 5, and I'm using my scale. That's of course the easiest way to get it completely even, but you can also eyeball it. And I'm going to go ahead and use some of the bowls that I already used for this recipe because there's no sense in dirtying in more bowls. Okay, I'm starting with my first bowl of dough and I'm adding 35 additional grams of my all-purpose flour blend to this dough, and I'm also going to do it to another one of the bowls of dough. And I'm going to roll this one out between 2 sheets of parchment until it's about 1/4 of an inch thick, fairly thick, and the other one a little thinner to about 1/8 of an inch thick. And I'll put them both in the fridge to chill for about 30 minutes. So I'm going to take the first one out. This is nicely chilled, and I'm just going to peel off the top parchment. And I'm using I think this is about a 3-inch in diameter round cookie cutter. You could also use a biscuit cutter or even a glass if you have to. And I'll just cut these rounds out and place them on a parchment lined baking sheet. And now I'm adding about a teaspoon of raspberry jam. This is seedless raspberry jam to the center of each. And I'm just going to fold them up and over the top and pinch them together. That's why they're called pinch cookies. Make sure to pinch them well and make sure they're well sealed so they don't open in the oven. And we're going to bake these at 350 Fahrenheit for 10 to 12 minutes or until very light golden brown just around the edges. Okay, on to the next cookie, which is chocolate thumbprint cookies. We'll start by adding a tablespoon of powdered sugar to 60 grams of unsweetened cocoa, and I'm going to pour in 5 tablespoons of hot milk that I just heated in the microwave, and this is called blooming the cocoa. It actually intensifies the chocolate flavor, but it also makes it easier to incorporate it into the dough. So I'll just add this to this one bowl of dough here, and I'm going to use my clean hand again to knead it through. And I'll put this in the fridge to chill for about 30 minutes. And by the magic of video editing, this is nice and chilled. So I've got a little bowl filled with some turbinado sugar. You could also use sparkling standing sugar or just plain sugar, but I personally like how the turbinado sugar adds a little crunch to the outside of these cookies. So I'll roll each of these into a ball about the size of a walnut or about 1 inch in diameter. And then I'll roll them in the turbinado sugar and I'll put them on my baking sheet, space them a few inches apart. And now I'm just taking my thumb to make an indent into the tops of each ball of dough. You could also use like a teaspoon measuring spoon or something like that. And I will bake these at 325 Fahrenheit for 10 to 12 minutes or until they're just set. Okay, on to the next cookie, which is I think our third cookie. These are frosted sugar cookie cubes. These are so easy to make and a different way to get a little bite of a sugar cookie. I've got my dough here that I must not have gotten on camera, but I added an additional 35 grams of flour to it. And I kneaded it through with my hand just like all the others. And I've got an 8 by 8 inch square baking pan that I've lined with parchment paper, and I'll just press the dough into the square baking pan. I like to use plastic wrap on top to get a nice and level, smooth surface. And I'll bake this at 350 Fahrenheit for 15 to 20 minutes or until just light golden brown around the edges. Alrighty, we're on to cookie number 4. These are sandwich cookies, somewhat like a Linzer cookie, but I've already got jam-filled cookies, so I'm opting for a different filling in these. Remember I rolled out one of those doughs into a round about 1/8 of an inch thick. So we've taken this out of the fridge and we'll just cut it into squares. You could also do rounds or whatever shape you want. You can also do this with just a ruler and a knife if you'd rather. And place these on a parchment lined baking sheet and make sure you have an even amount because we're going to take exactly half of these and punch out the middle with a smaller star cookie cutter or whatever shape you want. These will be the tops of the cookies, the sandwich cookies. And I'll bake these at 350 Fahrenheit for 8 to 10 minutes or until just light golden brown around the edges. And now we're on to the final dough, the 5th cookie. This is a simple mini M&M slice and bake cookie. I thought this was going to be my least favorite, but I have to say it's pretty darn good. So I'm adding about half a bag of mini M&Ms to this dough. And I'll just fold them through with my hand, of course, and I'll use a sheet of parchment I already used because you can use parchment more than once. So no sense in throwing it out just yet. And I'll roll this into a log on the parchment that's about the same width as this parchment. It's about maybe 2 to 2.5 inches in diameter. And I'm going to take some red sanding sugar and sprinkle it all over some of this parchment. And then I'm just rolling this into the sanding sugar so I can get the whole outside coated with that sanding sugar. You may have to go over a few areas more than once to get it completely covered. Okay, that looks good. I'll just wrap this in the parchment and then in some plastic wrap and refrigerate it for a couple of hours until it's nice and firm to slice. So by the magic of video editing, we are right back to this dough and it is perfectly firm. So I can slice it now into rounds that are roughly about 1/2 inch thick, maybe a little smaller or thinner. And I'll just place them on my parchment lined baking sheet. And there's nothing else to do to these. I'll just bake these at 350 for 12 to 15 minutes or until they're completely set in the middle. All right, guys, we've baked all the cookies. Now we'll go back and put some of them together. These are the sugar cookie cubes, and I've just got some American buttercream that I've tinted green. I'll leave the recipe for that in this post on my website. And I'll just spread that on top in an even layer. And I'll put this whole thing in the fridge for about 30 minutes before slicing. And of course, again, through the magic of video editing, this is ready to slice. It's nice and firm. It just makes it easier to get pretty slices out of it, especially with the frosting being nice and chilled. So I'll lift the entire thing out of here and just trim off the edges so they're nice and straight. These trimmings can be little snacks or whatever. And I'll just cut them into little cubes. I thought these are the perfect little bite-sized cookies. So we're done with those. Now for the chocolate thumbprint cookies. We've got to add something to that thumbprint we made. And I'm actually opting for chocolate ganache, y'all, because we already have jam-filled cookies. So just a little spoonful of this easy-to-make chocolate ganache into each thumbprint. I have the recipe for this on the blog post. And this chocolate ganache, it's going to dry a little firm, so it's almost like a fudge consistency. It is so, so good, y'all. You are going to love it. And there's plenty of ganache left over to fill our sandwich cookies too. You can also fill your sandwich cookies with jam, of course, but I'm just using the leftover ganache because why not? I'll just spoon some of this onto one of the whole cookies and top it with one of the cutout cookies to where it kind of oozes out a little on the top through that star. These are way better than a Linzer cookie in my opinion. I mean, it's chocolate, y'all. Ganache at that. These pinch cookies need a little bit of a sprinkling of powdered sugar on top. And now they're perfect. These are honestly one of my favorite cookies of all time. I've made some with apricot jam as well, and I don't know which is my favorite. And there you have it, folks. 5 different cookies from one cookie dough. Each one has a different flavor, a different texture. They're beyond easy, as you saw. And I made all of them in less than 2 days, start to finish. If you like these cookies, check out my 8 cookies from one sugar cookie dough that I created last year at the same time. I challenge you to make both cookie doughs, and you'll have a whopping 13 cookies to fill your cookie trays this year. Merry Christmas!